Zachary Carr from Beyond the Contour. Guys, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks. So Drew's the founder. I guess you do like all the rankings and stuff like that as well. Zach, you do a lot of the editing?
Yeah, somewhat, when I have time to do it,
Yeah.
when my real job allows me to.
Right. So can you guys, maybe we just go into it a bit, Drew, can you give me like a bit of an intro of how you got into Beyond the Contour?
Yeah, so growing up, I always had this website that acted as my own personal blog. And essentially, COVID came and I was pretty bored sitting at home, and I wanted to just rebrand and just sort of have more voices. And it was originally called drewharvey.com. And I just figured it was best to have other people contribute, be a bit more interesting. I mean, there's only so many people that want to read something from me. So I rebranded. Zach was the first guy that I picked up, and we just sort of focused on golf architecture, especially in Canada, because there's not that much coverage of it. And here we are, almost two and a half years later at this point.
So what kind of led you, Zach, we'll jump over in a sec, but what led you down the road of like golf architecture specifically?
Growing up, I'm from Lethbridge, Alberta, so when I was playing junior golf, there was this guy at the club named Mike Mazie, who I actually saw for the first time a couple of weeks ago in Florida. And he would go play Bandon Dunes or go play in the Netherlands or Pine Valley or whatever. And he'd come back talking about these places. And I was always intrigued at that notion that this guy was going to Clementon, New Jersey to play some random golf course. And then I played a junior golf event at Banff Springs, and that kind of opened it, and I knew that it was something that was different there than the rest of the golf courses that I was playing at the time, around Southern Alberta, like some of the local golf courses built by farmland people. And I got into the wormhole of reading books and sort of got into Golf Club Atlas, and eventually, you never come out of that wormhole if you go into it.
Right.
It's just a fascinating topic.
So I just quickly looked. Banff Springs has been number 8 for a couple of years on your list. So I guess that's what would sort of separate you from, like you mentioned, some of the courses that you're playing. Being a top 10 course in the country would be, a treat to play and something that just kind of stick out to you, right? So, Zach, can we jump over to you? Can you give us kind of an intro of how you got involved with Beyond the Contour?
Yeah, so I mean, I remember, I think it was one of the COVID years, just kind of all jumped together. Andrew was one of the only golf social Twitter accounts that were talking about Canadian golf, and I had never written anything. I wasn't on any kind of Golf Club Atlas boards or anything, but obviously Twitter, the way it is, everybody's free to comment and stuff, and so I would occasionally comment, I think, on his stuff, and then Andrew eventually ended up reaching out and kind of grew from there. Two guys like to complain about golf, and then just started talking, and it kind of snowballed from there, and then eventually he gave me the opportunity to write for his website, and here we are today, 2.5 years later almost.
So you mentioned you had like no writing experience before. It was just something that you kind of got involved in, and you were just passionate about golf, obviously.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I had a background with being an English major, which is otherwise pretty useless, but for this it ended up being useful.
Yeah, here we go.
Exactly.
We found a spot, yeah.
Exactly. So it ended up, I put my multiple degrees to work, and, maybe not the most, maybe not what I dreamt of writing about when I was growing up, but, it's one of those things that kind of fallen into, and it's been an awesome ride. It's been so much fun, and, I've never, as much as, it's something that takes a lot of time, and that maybe one day, career out of it or whatever that means. I've never treated it as a job. From day one, it's always been fun, and it's still a lot of fun. It's never felt like, oh, I got to go to the computer and write something. Always just been fun, and it's something I love doing still.
So when you guys, when you think back, Drew, like you mentioned that you were always kind of on like different boards and stuff like that. Like I know that from your past, like when we were talking, we have chatted in the past. We're going to treat this one like a new one. It's been a while since we've had a conversation, Drew, but, what made you want to like get this specifically started? I know you mentioned that there isn't a lot of this happening in Canada, but was there stuff like down in the States that like inspired you, over in Europe that inspired you, or just kind of like seeing a platform that you thought was not really exposed that you wanted to kind of connect with?
I think for me it was just traveling across the country. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Alberta and then moved to British Columbia and then finished my schooling in Toronto. So I'm very lucky to live in the three probably most famous or most notable golf provinces in the country, and kind of playing around, understanding what was good, what wasn't. I kind of felt like some of the stuff that was sneaky good was kind of underrepresented. So, for example, when I think of that, I think of like Waterton Lakes in southwest Alberta, where it's right at the base of the Rocky Mountains between Alberta, BC, and Montana, and it's just like a cool kind of, it's almost like a heathlandy vibe in the mountains, very low profile. But I think if more people saw it, it would be a pretty influential golf course in maintenance standards and sort of understanding what's good golf and what's not. So I was playing these places, and I felt like, obviously, in every country there's the national media outlet with Score Golf. But, when you look at the States, there's the Fried Egg. When you look at, like, the UK, there's, like, Cookie Jar and all these other smaller mediums that are going and finding those golf courses to talk about and kind of put them on a pedestal. So when I was traveling across the country and playing these golf courses, I felt that they deserved to sort of have that attention that, the common grounds of the U.S. got from the Fried Egg, or, Cleve Hill from Cookie Jar and all this stuff. And I just kind of felt that it made sense to start celebrating these golf courses that people locally know it's good, but potentially nationally they've never heard of.
Been able to, like, even get the opportunity to go see, or like even have the exposure, right? So it's kind of one of those things too. It's hard for, we'll see like Hamilton and St. George and everybody hears about Cabot and stuff like that. But then once you kind of get past that list, like I know we talked about Score Golf and the panel and stuff like that. But once you get kind of past that list, there's so many that people don't get the opportunity to play. Mm-hmm. I'm lucky enough to have a couple of friends who've played all of them. So it's like really great to be able to get their feedback and kind of tell me about the different courses and whatnot. I'm lucky enough to be able to play a handful that are in the area as well, but it's not easy for people to kind of learn about a course that might be halfway across the country, right? So Zach, we can kind of talk a little bit about the editing aspect of Beyond the Contour. So what's your role look like? What's your typical, if you're going to give us like a day in the life type of thing, but or you're about to release an article, what's that look like for you?
I think in terms of what I do for Beyond the Contour, we're very like, people who write for us, like, go ahead, write as long and on whatever interests you, right? It's kind of, and I think that's one of the main sort of, positive aspects of being able to work for Beyond the Contour compared to other sort of, outlets or media where there's kind of limited space. We're very much just like, you want to write a 25-minute article. I've written 25-minute articles that nobody gets through, right, except me, but, I have stuff to say and there's no sort of limit on it. I would say it's just kind of, go look at what our guys are, submit, kind of try to brush up a little bit on it. I believe in being as light-handed in editing as possible, trying to let sort of the individual voices still sound individual, not sort of tailoring it to my voice. I think that's kind of the best way with editing. So it's, it's just kind of very much going over the stuff, having a chat together. Okay, this is good. You can maybe probably flesh this out a little bit more here. Maybe this can be said in a little bit of a different way. I'm OCD with myself. So, I mean, sometimes it's just for me, like if it was up to me, I would just like keep going. But eventually it's sort of, okay, well, yeah, it's maybe not perfect, but you got to get it out. So I think it's just, kind of see where you can improve a little bit, maybe touch up here or there, but not to be overly heavy-handed and stuff as much as possible. Try to let, we have very extremely talented writers, Jason, Alex, Ben, Ian Murray, who's done a couple things. If I'm missing somebody, sorry. Tom Peters. Just got, try to let the individual voices sound individual, but to kind of make sure it reads well and it's somewhat grammatically correct. It's not too many errors and stuff.
Are we missing, that's a good point, are we missing anybody else on the team? Obviously not everybody's here with us today, but. So
we work in a way that's pretty, I think, interesting. So we've kind of opened the floor to anybody who wants to write. So if anybody wants to write an article, we let them, we give them that platform of, hey, we'll open that floor, we'll post it, we'll promote it. So I think in total we've had 8 people.
I think so, yeah.
Contribute to the website, which is pretty fun. So kind of anybody that follows, if they want to post an article, we've definitely let them. I encourage it. Like, I think the original idea was sort of like an open source of like people who just want to write about it, and that's what Zach's talking about, where it's very low key. Like, we kind of give carte blanche, where kind of the joke that I make. We have at this point probably an infamous Slack group chat where it's probably the the most unhinged stream of consciousness on Canadian golf ever, maybe, where it's just 24 hours, well, not 24 hours a day because we sleep, but pretty much like constantly going about something in Canadian golf courses, live, PGA Tour, or whatever. The joke that I kind of make in there is I just don't want to be sued.
Yeah.
So whatever you write, like I will publish it on any topic. It doesn't have to be, golf courses, but we're very lucky that, other than us, 6 people have trusted us to sort of put their word out and contribute to that.
Love that. It's like, I guess there's no like standard group chat, like group meeting or what. You're just kind of flying. You're just throwing it out there in the group chat, and you're kind of going with it, right?
Yeah, the group chat is largely how we stay in contact. Like we do a couple events per year now, which is pretty fun. So this year, for example, in 3 weeks, we're going to Cabot Citrus Farms.
Okay.
Some of us.
Some of us, yeah. Not everybody goes to every event. Tuesday after the Canadian Open, so June 4th, we'll be at Brantford, so unveiling the new golf course there. And, then we have 2 more later in the year. We're going to do a skins game at Norfolk. So we just try and do these gatherings that, if the community wants to come and be a part of, obviously they're welcome to. We're trying to open those doors of some of the clubs that we've been lucky enough to experience and kind of open those doors for them through kind of a medium that allows them to play the golf course. Generally, we bring in the architect or one of the architects to talk kind of about the project or about their projects or just about the golf course in general. And we're trying to develop that community. And other than that, really, we don't get the chance to be together that often because, Ben, for example, is in Alberta. Zach and I are on the road a lot in the summer, and so we use those examples. And the Slack group chat largely is where we kind of develop that community.
So if we can get some of the listeners interested in the event, Drew, you mentioned that you'll have like maybe the architect of a course. Like I know last year you guys were at Grand Mere, and can you give us an idea of what that would look like? If I came to attend the event, what would it look like for me for the day?
Events kind of change depending on each one, but so at Cabot Citrus Farms in 3 weeks, I guess we're recording this now, so it'll be pretty current when this drops. We're going to play the new Carew course, which was the Kyle Franz overhaul of World Woods, Pine Barrens, and then we're going to play Mike Nuzzo's The Squeeze.
Great course.
Great course, and then Kyle Franz is going to talk to us about the golf. So kind of we open the floor. Anybody can ask questions. Meals are included, merchandise is included. It's kind of all in one. You go there for the day typically, and it's sunrise to sunset if you want. This year, Brantford is going to be 18 holes. I guess I can't review the other 2 yet. But yeah, so generally, like last year, we had Jeff Mingay and Lauren Rubenstein speak at Lookout Point. So we did 36 holes at Lookout Point. Food there. Grand Mere in Quebec. We had Keith Cutton and Adam Stanley speak. So we're just kind of fostering those relationships that we have. Very lucky to have developed in the community and kind of sharing those conversations that we've had behind closed doors to the public of the people who come to the events.
I love that. If so we're getting to this point here. Can we talk about what the criteria is for one of the golf courses? I know we're going to get a bit deeper into some of the courses. I'm sure we'll chat about some of them in length, but for you guys are just starting. So at this point in time, we're just unveiling the top 125 to 100. In the coming weeks, as this comes out, there'll be a few more. We'll probably be down to 50 or something like that, 25. But what is the criteria for a course to be on that list?
You want to take a swing at this? Or you want me to
Go ahead.
4 courses to be on the list. Kind of the way that we set it up. Our first list ever was 2 years ago. It was one of the first keystone pieces we launched because we kind of wanted to come out with a bang. We compiled a list of what some of the other websites that do rankings, the top 100 that they did. So there's like 2 or 3 of them that do it, and that gave us like 120 golf courses. And then we sort of filled in the other 80, and we submitted a ballot to, at the time, 17 panelists, and they checked off which one that they have done, which one that they've played or seen, because some of them are architects, and architects see golf differently than we do, very differently, I would say. So they prefer to walk. But then they would check those off, and they would put them into specific tiers of where they felt that it ranked in the country. So we're not
Okay.
asking for, you know, what's Jasper Park Lodge's fun out of 10, or you know, St. George's resistance to scoring out of 25 or whatever. It's simply just like, we took those bar conversations or the post round conversations on, do you prefer Banff or Jasper, or do you prefer, you know, Hamilton or Toronto, or any of the great matchups in the country, and sort of asked people to rank them how they would in a conversation.
Now, on the other side of that, what does it take to be a panelist to get that information to you?
I think knowing, like, because the way that we do it largely relies around having seen a lot of golf courses, it's important to travel around. And I know other panels too, like even down in the States, it's a criteria. You have to know what you're seeing to be able to talk about it in general. Our panel is smaller than most. Like, I think Golf Magazine or Score Golf would be the next smallest at like just over 100. We're 27 this year, so
Okay.
a little more than last year, or 2 years ago. And largely those individuals have seen most of the golf in the country. So the panelist who's seen the most, he's seen 166 of the 200 best golf courses in the country.
Wow.
And that's coast to coast. That's Victoria to St. John's, Newfoundland, like as far north as, you know, Waskesiu Lake, and as far south as St. Thomas or Cherry Hill or whatever is the furthest south golf course. So
Damn. 166. Would be playing a bunch of those a couple times too, I'm sure. And
yeah,
that wouldn't be all of them. That's a lot of golf. That's a full-time golfer.
yeah.
Works in
That's-
golf. He works in golf.
Yeah,
Helps
we
him.
were, yeah.
That's
He
a
works in
professional golfer. That's you're getting paid. Like at that point, you're just like, that's your gig. You're just playing golf. I love that. Now, if somebody's like kind of listening at this point and they want to become a panelist, or they want to like connect with you, they want to kind of get information. Again, like all the show notes for Beyond the all the information for Beyond the Contours in the show notes below. Go give it a follow. Go check out the rankings. They're fascinating. But if they want to like inquire more or speak with you directly, like what are some of the feedback that we would hear if you, like, you're gonna obviously, like you said, look for somebody who's been around the game for a long time, checked out a lot of golf courses. If somebody's not at that point and they're kind of wanting to get into it, what would you encourage them to do to be able to kind of maybe do this down the road?
I think just playing a lot of golf courses. It doesn't
Right.
matter what level of golf you're playing, what style of golf course or quality of golf course. If you're able to sort of play two golf courses next to each other and you know, put together a decent argument on what's better and why it's better, and sort of use some of that knowledge through some of the great books in the game on architecture, like, you know, The Spirit of St. Andrews by Alistair Mackenzie, or, you know, even like the Links by Robert Hunter, or any of Tom Doak's early writings. Be able to articulate why you think golf course X is better than Y. I think that's a great start. And if you kind of do that, people will see you're passionate. I would not, as someone who's done it, I'm only 26 years old.
Right.
And I've played the entire top 100 in the country. I would not say no to a lot of things early in those years, just trying to foster those relationships and make those connections. Even if it was, you know, the 170th best golf course in the country, like you know, you're still going and playing with somebody who, you know, might support you, might be very friendly. You might be able to reciprocate in the future. A lot of those have come as, you know, they've become some of my great friends, especially in Ontario when I first moved out here, where, you know, someone was like on Instagram, was like, you want to come and play Redcrest?
Right.
It's like, you know, Redcrest is never making a list. Doesn't mean it's not a good golf course. But I would just be open to growing your network and, you know, seeing lots of golf courses if you can.
Now, Zach, we talked earlier about some of the members on the panel, some of the team members. Now, can we talk a little bit about more of what they might do, like who some of them are, what maybe they bring to the table? I know they're not here, they're not able to be with us, so you're going to kind of give your opinion on what they might, but try to be nice, man. Try to be nice here. But no, can you kind of talk about maybe a couple of the members on the panel that are in like your tight group of the 8 or so, and maybe what they do?
I think like for me, the one that was really exciting to sort of have on the panel and actually to contribute to one of the projects that we got upcoming was Robert Thompson, who I think me growing up as somebody who was interested in Canadian golf was kind of a massive sort of probably the sort of the leading figure of that sort of late 2000s, early 2010s when he had Going for the Green, which I thought, even to this day, I think is still probably the best golf blog out there. Specifically for the reason that I think he did exactly what we've been trying to do, where everything wasn't sunshine and roses or whatever the expression is, where he's not just saying everything is great. He wasn't afraid to say something, well, okay, they did this well, but they did this poorly as well, or this could have been better. It was very sort of honest, positive and negative in a respectful sense, where I think that was missing in a lot of golf writing, especially, in the last couple of years, where it seems like nobody's, people are just willing to everything's just say positive, positive, positive. Well, okay, but if you keep it respectful and you actually think about it, there's a way to kind of go and do it. I think having him on the panel and helping us and supporting us was really cool for me, because he's kind of, everybody has their sort of influences, and he was really mine in golf. Other than that, I think the one thing that I find is exciting about sort of the panel that we have is that it's very different background and very different geographical locations. We have guys from PEI, we have guys from Quebec, we have guys from like northern Quebec, we have guys from Ontario, we have guys from Saskatchewan, BC, wherever. I don't know if we have anybody from the territories.
No territories.
No territories. Maybe somebody from the territories out there.
If there's anybody listening who's played a decent, even just an okay amount of golf in Canada, who's played golf in the territories, we will take you as a panelist. We need that regional representation.
I'll dive into the stats of the episode and see, because sometimes you get in there and you're like, somebody's listened from like Japan, and you're like, what? Like, how'd you find us? Like, obviously it's gotten into some Spotify algorithm or something like that, and they've clicked it and checked it out for a minute or two, but it's just, then there'll be like people from Denmark or something like that. And it's just kind of interesting in that sense. But I think too, having like a vast amount of knowledge from around the country is obviously super important. That's going to lend to getting as much feedback as you can collect. And I look at the list, right? So we like go to, the top 20, and then you think like, for most people playing them, if you weren't able to share some piece of negative information, which unfortunately you're going to have to on like good wood or something like that to separate good wood from Cabot links, like or else they're all just number one, right? Like they're that good. They're all so good, right? So in my opinion anyway, it'd be very hard to like distinguish what the two would be. So I think that, not trying to be negative, but you have to be able to find those things where courses can improve, and I'm sure a lot of owners and architects appreciate that as well, right? So I have a question for you guys. I was reading through some of the notes that you sent me, so thanks, Drew, but routing. I have a decent idea of what routing would be, but you talk about routing a lot through the courses. Can you explain maybe what that is, or Zach, if you like that one?
We could both take a swing
yeah.
at this. I think it'll be interesting to get two perspectives.
I think it'll be good because I was noticing that word being used a lot, and it kind of is used almost on probably most of the breakdowns, right? So can you kind of explain what that is, why you would use like that terminology, or some of the terminology that you guys might find, or a listener might find while they're checking out the rankings?
Yeah, routing is, I'm lucky that with the website I've had the ability to spend a decent amount of time with some very talented architects. Of the criteria that makes a good golf course, I would say the two that they focus on the most is routing and the actual green complexes, because everything else can be changed. And the greens are largely, I would say, the signature of a golf course. It's kind of how you know who built it. But the routing itself, in my opinion, is it's the pages that the book is written on, basically, where I focus a lot on kind of the flow of the routing, like, if it starts par 4, par 5, short par 3, short par 5, drivable par 4, it's going to feel kind of clunky at the start, and it's going to be hard to get into a rhythm. Whereas, if a golf course kind of flows through the landscape in a way that sort of feels like that, Golf Week calls it the walk in the park test, and I like that terminology where, golf at its core is just kind of walking around a piece of property with a stick and a ball in hand. So for me, how that sort of flows through the landscape, how it explores the topography in various ways, if it is a good piece of ground. If it's not, then generally, like Marine Drive, for example. Marine Drive is, I would say, generally a controversial golf course among our panelists. I happen to really like it because it's 92 acres, which is far south of what a golf course should be today, like if you're going to ask an architect how much land they need, it's probably 160 acres
Okay.
minimum. A lot of these golf courses, I think Ovenbird, for example, just off the top of my head, is built on 350 acres. Sagebrush built on 350 acres. Marine Drive is 92 acres, and it gets 18 holes in a way that is pretty impressive how it sort of, changes direction and works through the property. So that would be my definition of routing. I'm sure you got.
To be honest with you, I struggle with it, with routing, because, I don't build golf. I don't really see too many. I haven't seen many golf courses that are in construction. Even if you took me to a golf course that's out in construction, I'd look at a field or I'd look at a tract of trees and go, I don't know how you're going to make this into a golf course, right? It's not it's not what I make my living on. It's not something I've studied to building a golf. So like Andrew was saying, I think it's a difficult thing. I think it's something that, in terms of evaluating, it's probably the hardest thing maybe to evaluate a routing, especially kind of looking at what could have been done better. Again, it's a bit like I'm trying to the right sort of the comparison to it. I think you kind of know it more. Sort of, is this a good routing? Was it? It's a tough thing to really judge. A lot of it's just a feel thing to me, is how I see it. Did the golf course kind of flow well? Did I come off of it exhausted? Did I feel like I was taking 5-minute cart drives between? It's a
that's
tough
kind
thing.
of my opinion or thoughts of it. When I
Yeah.
think of routing, I think like, what is it like? Kind of like, tee box to fairway fairway to green, and then what was it like to get to the next hole and things? And did it flow well? Like flow is kind of
Yeah, it's hard. I think it's one of the hardest things to sort of to judge and to understand and to learn in golf, right? Especially people who don't kind of get a chance to see the golf course that's getting built and stuff. I'm not going to profess that I know everything about it. I think a lot of it's just kind of, in your gut when something feels well, right?
Yeah, and I would jump in with, my writing, like I don't come from an English background. I don't come from a writing background at all, but I kind of like to compare it to pop culture, right? Like when you watch a movie, generally the best movies are very well paced. Like you're never, it's not the climax for 2 hours straight. It's not the lull point for 2.5 hours, and you get to like, there's little tidbits here and there that get exciting, and then it kind of goes back down, and and I think every architect, much like directors, has a different flow where, Christopher Nolan might make a movie different than Quentin Tarantino, where Quentin Tarantino's all over the place and Christopher Nolan's building to that, major reveal of the plot. To me, routing is sort of the plot of the movie, and I think it largely, like a great routing is very much like a great movie where the pacing is excellent, and it just sort of feels like, you're building to something, but you're never peaking too early.
I think one of the things that as I've actually thought about it a little bit more in the last couple of years, where my opinion has changed, seeing, having the chance to see a lot more golf and stuff, and is the idea of kind of sort of, let's say, breather holes or holes that are kind of a little bit nothing holes. I think if you look at Laval sur le Lac, I think it's one of the really good sort of routings in terms of pacing, in terms of building it up, what Ian and Mike Weir did there. There's a couple holes that you play and you think, well, there wasn't much going on here, but then right at the next hole you'll get, really intense green, or you get a tee shot that's pretty difficult, or you'll get something that, that causes you to sort of, I hate to use the expression, but pucker up a little bit, right?
Right.
And hit a shot. But then, then he'll give you kind of a wide open shot or a more seemingly wide open shot where you can kind of take a breather and hit it. So it's not just kind of like that intense stretch for, for 3-4 holes. Or really sort of, for 3-4 holes, It's kind of, there's moments where it crescendos and then it goes down a little bit quieter. And so I think, like Andrew was saying, having that pacing throughout the routing is sort of, is very important.
All right, that was a great explanation, but I'm glad I asked that because I didn't expect the movie route, but that was such a good just way to kind of break it down for the listeners, definitely too. But you wanted to add on to that one, Drew?
I think if you're talking about routing and sort of flow and pacing in movies, I think probably the best description is, or the best example is for those who have played it. Banff Springs gets a lot of criticism, even as the 8th best golf course in the country. Like Banff Springs is, I would say, like one of the most iconic golf courses in the world, not just Canada. Like most people, when you think of Canadian golf, at this point, I mean, Cabot Cliffs is obviously in there as well. But Banff Springs for years, it was like Banff Springs and Glen Abbey, because Glen Abbey used to host the Canadian Open.
Right.
Every year, those were the most iconic golf courses in the country. Banff Springs in the 80s, to make room for a new clubhouse and the new 9 holes, they moved their starting hole to what would have been Stanley Thompson's 5th hole. Right.
Okay.
So it moved from, you teed off at the base of the Fairmont Hotel, which is one of the world's best hotels. It's like this massive castle in the Rocky Mountains, and you teed off from this high point over Spray River to this amazing fairway that I think Jack Nicklaus vouched for as like one of the best starting holes in the world. And you ended right at the peak, and the final 8 holes sort of wind along the Bow River and sort of give you this tease, this hotel as you get closer, and eventually just like it's right in front of you, towering over you. And now, as a result, moving it to the 5th hole to make room for this new 9 holes, it feels like you're starting on chapter 5.
Okay.
Right? So you get to the famous Devil's Cauldron by the 4th hole instead of the 8th, right halfway in the round almost. You get to the original finishing hole as the 14th hole. So you get to the climax at the 14th hole, and then the 15th hole was the original first hole, and it's a bit of a clunky way to get from 14 green to 15 tee because it was never designed to be middle of the round. The example that I would use is Cabot Links, where you start in the town, you make your way to the harbor, you kind of get a tease of the ocean on 7 and 8, like you're not on the ocean, but you're pretty close. You go back into town, and by the time you get out to 14, you're on the ocean. 14, 15, 16 is the ocean, and then you sort of head back into the town. So it kind of gives you all the elements of the site in a way that, if you just went to the ocean immediately because you wanted, that wow factor right off the bat, it doesn't feel like you're building to anything. Like you're not building to the climax of the movie. Or the story that Rod Whitman's trying to tell at Cabot Links.
I think if you stay at Cabot too, another good example would be Cabot Cliffs. You start on the front 9 and you wind kind of down into the meadow, then you kind of come back to the ocean for the middle, then you go away from it inside on 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 you kind of come over the cliff, and that's really sort of like if you want to use the example, your big battle scene, right? And that 15 you got playing down to the ocean, 16 over the cliff, 17 over the cliff. Then you got 18, that's kind of like a little bit of a less intense tee shot, but it's kind of like that riding into the sunset moment after the battle where it ends sort of in that romantic kind of ending to it where, it's not as intense maybe as 16, 17, the shots over the cliff, but it's still sort of that big like wow as you're walking off down sort of the big wide fairway, especially at night and you're playing into the sunset.
I didn't expect this response, guys. This is great.
I would say routing is another great one is Jasper Park Lodge.
Okay.
Which for anybody who's followed me, it's my number 1 golf course in the country. Alistair McKenzie kind of gush over it. Obviously, he built Augusta National and Cypress Point and Pasatiempo and Royal Melbourne, and that's a pretty decent resume.
It's not bad.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Jasper is such a great journey. I think, it tells such an interesting story where you just kind of start near the hotel. Like the hotel is much different than Banff. It's much smaller. There's individual log cabins or like just individual cottages cabin feel versus like the massive hotel at Banff Springs. And you kind of go through the meadow, you go up to the mountain, you come back to the meadow before ending around this stunning glacier lake, and then you end on this swooping downhill par 4 that Alistair McKenzie called the best finish in the world of golf, and that's obviously large praise. And I think it's just Jasper kind of throws you the excitement on like the 3rd tee shot, 4th hole, and then you get to the 8th hole, 9th hole, and then you get to 14, 15, 16, and 18. Like the moments come and go in a very deliberate manner, I would say.
Now, do you guys? We do have a question here. I posted on Instagram, so I do want to come back to that. But do you guys have like a favorite architect? Like Beyond the Contours, obviously a lot about architecture. So do you have like a favorite? Obviously, it sounds like it's Alistair McKenzie and Zachary. Do you have?
Well? I would say my favorite architect, obviously, is Alistair McKenzie because I had the chance to play Cyprus a month ago. Not the gush. That was just like the greatest day of my life. My life peaked right there. I would say, obviously, in Canada, probably Stanley Thompson and Rod Whitman. I think by far and away the 2 best architects we've had in this country. My favorite architect's actually a guy who did mostly his work in Europe called Tom Simpson. I played a couple of his courses around in Paris, which, not only being the world's greatest city, is actually a really good golf city too. And they're like really cool golf courses on flat land where he just throws these like crazy greens at you with these big rolls and these big dips and these big hollows. He'll throw cross bunkers. He'll put these big mounds that make it blind. And I think what I especially admire about those golf courses is that you give any architect like a seaside site in the sandy dunes, he should be able to build something good.
Right.
Now, you give an architect a flat piece of ground with no features, I think that's when you see the really talented architects come to the fore. And the ones I played from him, like, again, evaluating a piece of ground is not something I can do very well, but even I can see that they're far from a site. And like, he just produced great golf courses. I think 2 of them are in the world top 100. Another one I would put really right on the cusp of it. And so I think seeing those golf courses, it was like, wow, this guy's really good. And he's done some stuff in the UK that's also really well thought of. So I haven't seen a ton of it, but the stuff I saw around Paris was just like mind-blowingly good.
Now, Drew, I didn't want to take that from you because there's obviously probably a deeper answer there. But is there one that you're kind of more fond of?
I think of the stereotypical answers, obviously everyone is going to say Donald Ross and Alistair McKenzie and modern, Tom Doak or Bill Coore. The two that kind of jump to mind for me would be, I really like Harry Colt's work. It's unfortunate that we only have 2 of them left in Canada because Harry Colt was largely prolific across the country, or more Eastern Canada when he was working in the 1910s here.
What ones are those, Drew?
Hamilton and Toronto Golf Club, and then he would have contributed to the Dorval location at Royal Montreal before it moved to Ile-Bizarre. He would have done Bonus in Calgary. He contributed to Royal Ottawa, although nobody really knows exactly what he did at Royal Ottawa.
Clubhouse fire that burnt the plans, so nobody really knows.
There was a big clubhouse fire, I think in 1930s, right?
They had a couple, but I think 1930 is the one that sort of pooched it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's some other speculative courses that I don't want to get into because I'm trying to prove a couple still.
Yeah.
So Colt, to me, Colt is basically like the father of Canadian golf in certain, like, largely National Golf Links America in the States is seen as kind of that watershed moment of like great architecture where in the States they transition from like Tom Bendelow sort of like traveling around the country just putting stakes in the ground and saying tee off here and play to this green, where Colt or where National Golf Links America is deliberately built for strategy and golf architecture and sort of like having a better playing experience. Toronto Golf Club in 1911 served as that same moment for Canadian golf. And Stanley Thompson took a lot from Colt with, routing his golf courses starting with the par 3s first. And it's never been proven if Thompson met Colt on site, but Stanley Thompson was a caddy when Toronto Golf Club moved from Scarborough to the current location while Colt was building the golf course. So I don't think it's a stretch to go. They both start their golf courses with par 3s, like when they're routing. That's the first holes that they pick out. So I think that's Colt would be my first pick. And then the other one I really like out of the States, and he was very unusual in how he approached golf because he was an engineer by trade. He never went over to Scotland. He never studied golf. He got into it purely off the luck of his brother being a drunk, basically, building Marion for this guy named Hugh Wilson. His brother got kicked off the job and William Flynn stepped in. And so William Flynn would be my other one where every sort of conventional rule about golf architecture, William Flynn almost intentionally broke. So everything like, generally on a dogleg right or a dogleg left, there will be a bunker on the inside corner. You'll have to play closer to get the better angle. William Flynn generally would make you hit to the outside corner, and the greens largely slope away from you. So it's very unusual. And William Flynn produced some great golf, like Shinnecock Hills, Cherry Hills in Denver, which is where Honor Palmer won the U.S. Open there when he drove the first green. Largely contributed to the major overhaul of Marion. A lot of people give Hugh Wilson solo design credit, but William Flynn deserves a ton of credit as well. So that would be William Flynn and H.S. Cole would be my two.
So do you think, Drew, if you go to a course, obviously it sounds like you're going to collect a lot of information about who the architect is, who some of the builders are, some of the work that's been done. But if you were to go to a course blind, do you think that you could form maybe an opinion of who one of the creators, architects, some of the work that's been done just by being able to go for a walk?
I think to use the movie reference again, like, I mean, a Michael Bay movie when you see a Michael Bay movie.
Yeah.
Each architect has their own kind of calling cards on what they generally like. A lot of that is stereotypical as well. Like A.W. Tillinghast, for example, he doesn't have a style. Like Somerset Hills is very different against Wingfoot, against San Francisco Golf Club, against Baltimore. But I think I could definitely narrow it down to one or two. The issue is I've done so much research on golf courses that I'm able to, I would know which golf course you're dropping me at.
Right.
So it's, yeah.
I think I'm just kind of curious because the deeper we get into it, the more we learn about you and how much you know about golf and golf architecture. It'd be kind of like a fun scene to like, I don't know, blindfold you, drop you off at a course, and like you'd probably be able to pick out where you were because you played all the top 100, but or you played the top 100. You had said, right?
In Canada.
In Canada, yeah. So it'd be kind of fun to just drop you at one maybe where you don't know. Take him to Paris if he hasn't been there, Zach. Drop
That's
him
right.
off and see who some of the builders are there. I think that would be a fun little content piece for you guys down the road one day.
So we were talking about this driving here. I have a friend who she works in media in the golf world, and one of her roles is posting photos.
Okay.
And she'll get sent, like the company will get sent photos of places that, you know, maybe she doesn't remember or hasn't been in a while. So it's quicker or more convenient to just text me which hole it is, and I'll tell her which hole it is immediately.
It's scary. It's
Just because, like, for whatever reason, I can remember the hole. And so that game's been going on. She's been trying to stump me for probably 3 weeks and has not been able to yet. So
This is where I need to build in the Zach Galifianakis gif because we've been talking movies of him at the blackjack table and hangover.
Exactly.
And that's Drew there with all the different course architecture and stuff. So we did get a question on Instagram that I wanted to come back to. I like it. It's just a fun question of your top 5. Each of you, your top 5. Are you guys comfortable kind of sharing what your own personal top 5 would be? Zach, can we start with you?
okay. My number 1's Toronto Golf Club.
Okay.
So I should preface this by saying I haven't been out west in Canada, so I have that big blind spot. But yeah, so my number 1 would be Toronto Golf Club. I guess it's probably not the most popular pick for the number 1 course in the country. There's a couple of us that have it number 1, but that's my favorite golf course. I think it's so good. Just everything about it's just so good, and it's getting better because they're taking out a ton of trees and stuff.
I think Mikey will like that. If Mikey's listening, he'll like that.
Actually, I played with him there.
Yeah, did you?
Mike from I can't say his last name.
Marty Savage.
Marty Savage.
Oh man,
Yeah.
he's been on like 4 or 5 times now. So
Yeah.
I always ask that question now because I think he was like our 5th episode, and I didn't ask the question before the answer or before the podcast, and I just went with it. I just confidently like went with something, and it was not even close. And it's Marty Savage. Yeah.
He was utterly disgusted by my 2006 Titleist 3-wood.
Yeah. So that would probably get him.
Yeah, he was disgusted by that.
Yeah, there's nothing.
But nothing's taken that out of my bag.
There's
Never.
nothing. Well, I guess he was playing those artisan wedges for a little while, but I assume, he's moving product in and out of his bag pretty
Yeah.
quickly. He has that luxury that maybe sometimes not everybody has. So, but yeah, so we got Toronto Golf Club up top.
Yeah, Toronto Golf Club. My number 2. Sorry to go off on another tangent, but I think one of the interesting things about debating the best golf course in Canada is that there's probably 8 or 9 that can reasonably be number 1, and you can't really argue. If you told me this is number 1, I'd be yeah, sure. If you told me this is number 1, I'd be like, yeah, sure. So I think like in the States there's probably a few less, but like in Canada that's one of the interesting things that there's so many candidates that could be number 1. You can have a long, you could be here days arguing which is better. So I preface, going back, saying like these courses are really tight in terms of what should be number 1. But my number 2 would be Cabot Links. I think both Cabots are really good. I just prefer Cabot Links a little bit more. I think the greens from 50 yards in kind of elevated above Cabot Cliffs ever so slightly. Like Cabot Cliffs are really good too. Number 3 is St. George's. Tee to green, I think it's probably the best ball striking, challenged, consistent sort of. Consistently calls for great golf shots. Awesome setting. Everything, just a great golf course. Number 4 would be. Where was I? Oh, Cabot Cliff, would be my number 4. Again, spectacular setting. I think if you're bringing somebody to Canada and there's one spot you would make them play golf, that's probably a pretty good sort of choice for it. It has a couple flaws, a couple holes I don't think work that well. But there's no denying how just spectacular it is. And number 5, I'm going to go a little bit off the board and say Mount Bruno, Montreal.
Okay.
I think, Cape Breton Highland Links is probably a better golf course. I had it ahead of that. But in my personal top 5, I just love Mount Bruno.
It's
I think
personal, yeah. It's personal.
Yeah. Realistically, I'd rank Cabot, Highland Links ahead of it. But personal top 5, Mount Bruno, Montreal. I just think from when you drive up the entrance drive to the end of the day, I think it's just the most special place to play golf in the country. It's like going back to the 1920s over in the UK.
Love that. Well, and like there's got to be a story to it, right? So
yeah. So that'd be my personal top 5.
Yeah, don't worry about us, man. You don't have to be quiet or anything for us. We're just we'll be just kind of chatting away, but go ahead. We don't mind. Go ahead, hit balls. The mics don't really pick them up anyway, so you're all good, man.
That's amazing.
Drew, can we get yours?
Yeah, so I think one of the most interesting things about ranking golf courses, and probably the best way to do it is by the Doak scale. So for anyone who's not aware, the Doak scale is largely based off Tom Doak's The Confidential Guide to Golf Courses. So it kind of ranks them into tiers. It never goes one or the other. I'm obviously going to rank them in order, but I'm going to start by saying that I think Jasper Park and Cabot Links would be sort of my coin flip number one in the country, depending on the mood and what I'm feeling. I'm maybe sentimental to the West because I'm from Alberta, so I would generally lean Jasper just because I think it's probably maybe, like, other than Cypress Point, maybe the best story I've ever seen, where it's very clearly telling you something. And then after that, I think there's three that you could kind of reasonably argue. Like St. George's would be in there, obviously. I think that's probably Stanley Thompson's most fascinating golf course, because generally of the famous Thompson fives, that'd be Banff, Jasper, Capilano, Highlands Links, and St. George's. It's the one that's deliberately harder. And I think if you put St. George's in New York City, more people would talk about it. I think it kind of loses some of that, umph of like a Winged Foot or
Being in the small town of Toronto.
Yeah, it's small.
The tiny little town of Toronto.
You put it next to Winged Foot in Scarsdale, New York, and to me, it stands toe to toe with Winged Foot. Like it's that good. Cape Breton Highlands Links, I have a strong appreciation for it because I think it's probably the most interesting 14 holes of golf in the country. The middle stretch is I would say bad. It's not good golf through the middle there after you get past the eighth hole. And then Toronto Golf Club has quickly become, I would say, a contender with Paul Shanna leading the work on removing some of the trees and clearing up some of those sight lines that Colt wanted originally, and just sort of exposing the landforms there. I forget who told me it, but it was a really good comparison where Toronto Golf Club is essentially Cape Kidnappers before Cape Kidnappers became a thing. Obviously not dealing with the inlets off the Pacific Ocean like New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
But you have these fingers kind of jutting out into this valley, and Colt's kind of finding his way to meander it. And I think ripping out those trees has really kind of exposed that in a cool way that, where St. George's routes largely in the bottom of the valleys, Toronto Golf Club plays on top of them. And obviously there is some of the valley holes there at Toronto Golf Club too. Like the best one, in my mind, at Toronto Golf is the ninth hole, and that's down in the valley. But I think those would be my top five. I don't think I'm missing. Capilano would be the next one out probably. I think that's my top six, I guess.
So Zach, if we're gonna kind of go through the list, like, so say we take the list that's going to be out. So again, if you're with us at this point, I should mention we're at Uptown Golf in Oshawa, which is cool. We're just sitting in the bay here, so you might hear a couple golf balls and stuff, but that's okay. We got Cobble Beach behind us, which is on the ranking sheet too. Which is I went through and grabbed one. I only hit a wedge here too, so that was it. I just wanted to make sure the screen was working.
Right down the middle.
Yeah, it at least went pretty close to down the middle, but I have not made the fairway. But if you were to give us, going through your list, in your personal opinion, the most underrated course in the country, what would that be for you? Drew, this is coming, so you can have a minute.
I thought you were going to ask me overrated so I can get more trouble than I already do.
That might still be coming. Yeah.
The most underrated golf course in the country, according to our list, and I don't even think it's close. Frankly, I think it's a black eye on our list that it's not in the top 100. It's Montebello near Ottawa.
Okay.
So at one time, Montebello when it opened in the 1930s, was widely considered the sixth best Stanley Thompson golf course. So after his Big Five, which would, if you translate that over, would probably put it back into the top 10. I think if you still go there and play it, and you have the ability to or the willingness to overlook some of the deterioration, some of the overgrowth, some of the turf issues that they have, it's pretty obvious why it was considered that well. Like there's 5 or 6 golf holes that are just amazing. Feels at certain parts it feels like Cape Breton Highland Links. Other times it kind of feels like St. George's. Sometimes it feels like Westmount. It's just really dilapidated. Obviously they're in some trouble because the ownership of the Evergrande Group owns them, and they've had some issues with bankruptcy or whatever it is. I'm not exactly sure. So hopefully brighter days are ahead for them. That would be my most underrated golf course at I think it's number 105 for me. I would have it in the top 50 right now. I think it's that good.
Okay.
Even being in probably, I mean, Andrew knows better. Is there a course in the top 100 that's in the worst shape than it right now? No, I think it's by far in the worst shape. But for $50 or whatever it is to cost, not too expensive, I think to me that's the most underrated golf course. I think it's just an amazing place. And it's a really cool place. You know, the hotel's really good. You know, the clubhouse, there's kind of a big sort of like dining hall. It's got kind of that old school sort of Tudor feel to it with the sort of the log cabin. And I think it's just a really cool place to play golf.
What about you, Drew? Most underrated course according to the Beyond the Contour.
It's like like we mentioned earlier that the person who's seen the most is 166 of 200. I've seen 163, so I've been lucky to see pretty much everything inside the top 150 almost. Most underrated, I think, and it's actually the biggest drop from 2022 to 2024, which I can't figure out why.
Okay.
Is Kelowna, and I think it's like 97 or something. And I think, you know, some of Jeff Mingay's more recent work is probably a bit more adventurous with, especially Cut and Fields. I think the redo of Cut and Field is fantastic, and probably to me it's Jeff's magnum opus at this point. But Kelowna is such a sophisticated, you know, dive into golf architecture where it's random enough that it still very much feels like an adventure, but everything is very deliberate. So it's just like this great playing experience, lots of short grass, a cool routing that kind of, you know, works around this pond at the very bottom of the property. The sixth hole is one of the best par fives in the country, where it doglegs around this mountain, like a legit. It's called Dilworth Mountain. It's right in the middle of Kelowna, the city of Kelowna. That would be probably my choice. Although there's not many that are like dramatically underrated. Like anything at like top 50, I would say I like Royal Colwood much more than 36.
Okay.
So I would put Colwood in that list as well.
Do you find that there's a big discrepancy between, let's use the two of you for an example. Like, is there a big discrepancy between your two lists? If you guys were to go through and like put your top 100 Zach and your top 100 Drew, would there be a big discrepancy in the two?
There's things that we strongly agree on, and then there is a couple courses that we would bicker about into the, like, I think the one that comes to mind is Highlands Links. Not that Zach doesn't like it, but to me, like, Highlands Links is one of the most adventurous golf courses I've ever played. You know, and Zach would have it a little bit lower. Not saying Zach would.
No, I had it like 8th, I think.
Zach had it
Okay.
8th, but I have it like 3rd or 4th. But I feel very strongly that I think it's better than, 6th or 7th, and Zach feels like it's adequately rated.
Okay.
So there's
Yeah, it's 8th. No, never mind, 7th.
There's definitely courses that I think we could debate until it.
They'll get us banned they'll get me banned.
If
All right, Zach. So I got one for you. If you were to look through the list, in your opinion, what would be the most overrated course? And let's take it from the Beyond the Contour list.
Eagle's Nest.
Okay.
Eagle's Nest. I for the world of me, I don't understand why they built the two styles of bunkers. Like, that's to me is just like a decision that I don't understand. It's not walkable. In all fairness, I'll give it, you know, considering that it was a dump before.
No, it was a dump adjacent, but I don't think it was a great site for golf.
Yeah, I agree. It wasn't a great site for golf, but to me, that and 40th was one of them. I was kind of like,
Okay.
I don't know, especially considering the price that they charge you.
Yeah.
They're like, it's an exorbitant price to play golf. That would be my one overrated, I would say. I don't think it's like off the top 100, but I'd probably have it maybe 60th rather than 40th.
Okay, so pretty good jump.
Yeah.
Now, some of the resort courses and stuff that I played, I've noticed they're obviously not walkable. Does that hurt the experience, like from a panelist point of view, when you're a panelist and you're needing to be able, like, you have to drive? Because there's, you know, I remember playing at Deerhurst, there's like probably over a kilometer in between some of the holes and stuff like that. So is that something that can kind of damage the structure, kind of like when we talked about that flow, that, you know, is that something that kind of hurts the...
We just touched on it. My big reason for having Cape Breton Highland Links number 8, people will say it's this great routing. Oh, I mean, and I do agree. It tells you, you know, it takes you from the ocean to the mountains to kind of to the valley, back down the ocean. I don't know if a routing could be great if you got two 400-yard walks in between of it. in
Right.
between in between holes. I don't know if it can be.
Yeah.
I would argue that no. Again, that's probably gonna get me in trouble, and people are gonna argue me with that. But you have to take two. Like nobody walks it. Is it really great routing if nobody walks it? I think it ruins the experience if you have to cart it. Now,
Well-
I get you can walk Cape Breton Highland Links, but that's where I see it. That's one of my knocks on it.
I think some of us too are like, I'm not from the old school and like really much with golf. Like I'm obviously wearing a hoodie. And,
Yeah.
like, I just enjoy kind of the casual approach to the game. I don't disrespect any of the kind of the old school, but I do think you got to be able to walk a golf course. Like
100%.
I think like the course needs to be walkable. Like even at my course at Port Hope, like we have this beautiful scenic bridge and stuff, but like the first 3-4 times you walk it, you're just like, you come back after 10, you got to do it again, and you're just gassed, right? It's like
It's the only exercise I get playing golf.
it's like I got to do this again, and it's just, and then you do it a few times, and you're down 25 pounds, a month and a half into the season. You're like, okay, I can handle this now, right? But it's like my calves look like Phil Mickelson's, like, halfway through the season. But it's like things like that where it's such a beautiful sight. So when you like see it, it's an attractive point of the course. It's kind of cool. It's kind of neat. You get up top, you can take photos of like the Lake Ontario and stuff. It's really cool. But if you're walking it, it can be kind of tricky, right? So I do want to ask you guys a couple pointed spots as I was reviewing the list last night. So we'll obviously go up top with Cabot Cliffs. It was, I believe, number 1 on the panel in 2022. That was when the last one that we went through, right, Drew? Okay, so, and now it's down to number 4. So, again, it's probably the most notable or recognizable. It's the most photographed course, I guess, probably in Canada. But is there, maybe a reason or a thought process as to why it's not the top spot?
I want to preface this by saying it's not my personal list or Zach's personal list. Like we have 27 individuals that contribute
course.
to it, so we can only really like speculate why the shift. And I found it very interesting that Cabot Links and Cabot Cliffs switched. So
Yeah.
last year or 2 years ago, it was Cabot Cliffs 1, Cabot Links 4. and
That's
now
where I
it's-
was going next. Is
Yeah. It's very, very interesting. Like in the methodology, like I just put the numbers into a spreadsheet. It spits out the list. Like so, it's very, people just put it in. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no editorial oversight into the list. It's just very funny how that happens.
We don't do anything political on this, but like Trump would be asking for a recount or something like that. Like you must have mixed the ballot up or something like that, and like But that was kind of my question. Is like they flipped, and Zach, you spoke a lot about Cabot Cliffs versus Cabot Links and the differences between the courses, and so I was just kind of, as an outsider, I was kind of curious as to what might trigger that to be like a direct flip or it kind of come down a little bit, right?
Like I said earlier, I think there's 8 golf courses in this country that anybody can put number 1, and you can't really make an argument against it.
Right.
It comes down to sort of just personal preference and what you favor in a golf course. And sometimes even the day you see it on, like I've only played Cabot Cliffs once. Sometimes you catch it on a good day. If you're playing Cabot Cliffs in 50-mile-an-hour wind and driving rain, it affects your experience if you play it once.
Of course.
Right? So, I mean, I think it was just kind of one of those that just, it's a tight sort of margin at the top. Right?
And I would add on to that I think like it is a tight margin. I also think it represents a shift in ideology in our panel where, to me, Cabot Cliffs is a very, very good golf course, obviously, and it's one of the best in the country by far.
Yeah.
But it's built to me more around sort of like the wow factor. Like Zach said earlier, if you're going to send one person or send a golfer to one golf course in the country, it reasonably would be Cabot Cliffs, or
Right.
even Banff Springs would probably be my vote, or just for the historical component. But Cabot Cliffs is an easy choice because to me it's a very Canadian golf course where you kind of have everything. Like it's almost like the modern Highlands Links in that regard. Cabot Links over time becomes kind of reveals itself to be a more detailed golf course, I would say. Like there's a bit more behind the scenes than Cabot Cliffs, where Cabot Cliffs is very, very spectacular every time you play it. But Cabot Links gets better. There's something that reveals it, and it's like a great song. You're going to hear that percussion again in the background or whatever the 5th time you hear it. Cabot Links reveals itself to be a more interesting golf course over time, and I think that's represented by the fact that 2 years have passed and they swapped.
Right. The next one I wanted to go to, kind of keep it up top, is Victoria. So it's still in the top 20, I believe, Victoria,
Yeah.
right? That one took a significant jump from where it was in 2022. When we talk about kind of the difference, like Zach, you mentioned the top 8, it's obviously a little outside of that, but how there's not a whole lot difference between maybe the top 8. I think it was just down around 16 or 18, Victoria. So, but to be able to make that big of a jump, we just talked about Cabot Cliffs. It's literally almost, well, it's as far across the country as you can go to the other side. But what would maybe contribute to the big jump for Victoria?
I think Victoria largely, like, I can't. I'm the second most weighted panelist. I cannot make a golf course jump 6 spots, so it's not just me. But we had more people see the golf course and think it was better than 24th. So there was just more ballots that kind of pulled it up. And I was one of the people that pulled it up a little bit. Like, I definitely submitted a ballot that helped it get better than 24th, largely because I think the details there are so good. Like, Jeff Mingay, his bunker work in restoring it is fantastic, and the golf course itself is very interesting in how it sort of balances like the oceanside holes versus the inland holes. And obviously one of the most valid complaints about Victoria is you want to talk about pacing, you want to talk about routing. The ocean holes come the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and then you go inland. But I think the inland holes balance it out nicely with some interesting greens, some very artistic bunkering schemes. So obviously I'm only speaking for myself, but I would speculate that just like knowing the numbers, seeing the ballots come in, just more people rated it a little higher than before.
Love that. So last time when we chatted, Drew, in the past, we'll look like a couple of young faces on there, but you can probably go back a few years and find it. Maybe not, but Lookout Point was the big jump on that list for you at the time, or it had gone up quite a bit at the time. This time it was Grand Mirror. So can we talk about how, like, we're getting down the list a little bit, but I think it jumped like 30-something spots, or can we talk about what contributed to Grand Mirror making, I think it was the biggest upward rise on the list?
Yeah, I think we should both touch on this because
Yeah, would love that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the obvious reason why it jumped is people actually drove up to Shawinigan to see it, which, aside from Grand Mirror, there's not really a reason to go up to Shawinigan. Not much.
Like a junior hockey team there.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I think a buddy of mine played
champions.
there. Yeah,
they won the World Cup 10 years ago.
Yeah.
God, we could talk about this Grand Mirror all day, I think. It's just we're in an era where social media and coverage is basically shed a light on just about anything that there is. Like, you pretty much know every golf course. It's very rare that there's one that's completely sort of unknown to the golf world. But that was one, just again probably because of its geographical location. You come out of the parking lot, you come around the clubhouse, and you just see like these golden age Heathland features, big Biarritz green, and these knolls, and it's one of the spots that, golf's about moments. Seeing great golf courses, moments that take your breath away and stuff, and seeing like number 10 there, coming around and seeing it for the first time, that this golf course from that area can be kept in that good of a shape. Really having just guys who had been there their whole lives, that and being that good and then being that completely off the golf radar. It's in this era, it's insane, like, really.
What about you, Drew? Can we get your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think Grand Mirror is interesting, and I speculate that we might get a bit of flack for it because we hosted an event there in September. And Lookout Point, you brought up Lookout Point. It was the biggest separator between the Score Golf list and ours in 2022.
Right.
2022 was our first list, and we hosted an event there as well. But that was pre that, so we were already leaning towards the classic golf courses. And Walter Travis is definitely an editorial favorite, I would say.
He is an
The difference with Grand Mirror jumping 37 spots is exposure, right? It's Initially there was 3 people that saw it last year, and it barely qualified. Like, I remember having to, I had seen Grand Mirror, and I had to go find another panelist to be like, have you seen this? Because when I played it in April 2021, I think that was probably the first time anybody ever wrote about this golf course post the Canadian Golfer ending in 1937. We hosted an event there, and I largely dragged a lot of our panelists up there, like just being like, this place is unbelievable. And so the big jump was it went from 3 panelists of 17 to now I think it's 13 of 27. So roughly half the panel is seeing Grand Mare now, which is a huge contributing factor to a golf course jumping up. I mean, the top 10, most people on the panel have seen 8 of the top 10, 7 of the top 10, right? But when you start getting into those Waskasu's, the Grand Mares, the Waterton Lakes, just having that exposure of people going to it makes such a big difference. And Grand Mare at 24th, I think, 24th is worth every penny and then some.
It's a little bit north of, like for when we talk Shawinigan, it'd be a couple hours like north of Tremblant, I guess, right?
The way it's like 40 minutes north of Trois-Rivières.
Okay. All right.
It's about an hour and 20 from downtown Montreal.
Okay, not bad.
Yeah.
It's definitely,
It's about an hour and 20.
we got some listeners out that way. It definitely
Yeah.
sounds like it's worth a look.
It's worth it. It took him about a year to convince me to go up there. And when I finally did, I've been there many times since.
And so, Zach, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but one of the biggest movers down was Kelowna, right? So is there a reason why? I think it was Kelowna?
Yeah, I don't think Zach's seen Kelowna.
I haven't seen Kelowna.
No?
If you're going to go with this, maybe,
Yeah.
he can speculate, but
Yeah, is there kind of like reasons why we think, like Kelowna is obviously seen by a lot of golfers every year. Is there any reasons that it might bring, we're not picking on just necessarily Kelowna, but any of the courses that are like maybe going down in rankings, is there any reason why they might be?
Again, I haven't seen Kelowna, so it's difficult for me to speak, specifically about that example. One thing I'll say, again, if we were doing this probably in the best way possible, we would do tier rankings. But nobody likes that. Everybody likes that 100.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're in the entertainment business.
Yeah.
We're here to entertain it. And having that 100, it creates a little bit of debate, creates some stuff. I would say a lot of times, courses that move down like that, again, it's fine margins, right? Somebody sees it who tends to not have a predilection towards that kind of golf course, especially if he's seen a lot of courses, for some reason doesn't like it, gives it, and you might think it drops 20 spots, but really it's not a huge difference. It's just kind of, they're tight margins in sort of those different segments of the list. Let's say, 1 to 8, 9 to 15, 16 to 40, right? There's not a ton that sort of separates them. And so I think a lot of it's just a numbers game that it's just kind of comes down to the shakedown, right?
Drew, what would be the most seen course in the country from your panelists?
Cabot Links, and then it would be St. George's, I think, and then Cabot Cliffs. A couple people haven't seen it just because it's not like new anymore. I mean, it's 8 years old, I think, at this point, but Cabot Links is number 1. I think it's like 24 of 27 panelists have seen it. Like it's a large margin.
Drew, some of the courses that are a little bit tougher to get to, but still made the list. Can you kind of speak to a couple of those?
Yeah, James Island outside of Sydney, British Columbia. For those who are really, really into the Canadian golf scene, it's a private Jack Nicklaus golf course on this private island, from this guy, big telecommunications guy. He sold it to Discovery Land, which is the company behind Estancia, Gaza Ranch, Mirabelle, Madison Club, some of those swanky U.S. private clubs. And what was cool when James McCaw owned James Island is he would generally, a couple times a year, invite some of the Victoria or Sydney high schools to come play his private golf course. And that was obviously 20 years ago now. So some of our panelists played that way 15 years ago, and they've played since, just kind of getting their foot in the door that way first. So they have submitted that. That barely made the threshold. Like James Island would probably be, in my mind, the most private, accessible club, like not a backyard club. Like Domaine Laforet is a bit more private, and some of these
Frog's Breath,
like some of these very exclusive, single owner. He's the only person that is. She's the only person that plays it. Waskasiu it's about 3 hours north of Saskatoon. That is like remote. That is definitely probably the highest ranked golf course that's not crazy private or anything. That's just really, really remote. That qualified for the list. I think 48th or 47th, and Like Grand Mare, like it's just exposure really. Like
Right.
if you make the trek to Waskesiu Lake, which is north of Prince Albert, like we're getting into basically the Arctic Circle. It's really, really good.
So just before we wrap, guys, I hope I didn't keep you guys too long, but before we wrap things up, so what do we got kind of on tap for the rest of 2024? So as we're listening here, again, Beyond the Contour, the show notes, head down the show notes below. If you're kind of in the car and whatnot, stop, pull over, click the link, go through. You guys got some great content on there. Go through the list. It's a rabbit hole to get through. But some of the things that's kind of coming up for you guys this year, and some of the things that you guys are, maybe some of the courses that you're really hoping to attend.
Yeah, in terms of like projects on the Beyond the Contour side, we're releasing a limited edition print book about the top 100. So to me, it's the most in-depth look at Canadian golf since John Gordon's book about Canadian golf, where he discusses, like, I think it was called The Great Golf Courses in the Country or Great Golf Courses in Canada. So it's 342 pages of content specifically dedicated to the top 100 plus the next 50 that missed, and then some background on some of our panelists, some discussion from architects like Jeff Mingay about golf courses and rankings, some write-ups from all 8 of us, plus I think Robert Thompson contributes, so Zach was talking about him earlier. 4 events plus a skins game this year, so 2 have been announced, Cabot Citrus Farms and Brantford, 1 more in Ontario, and then 1 in Quebec the Monday after the President's Cup in Montreal, so that'll be a ton of fun. And then generally we're just, we'll just be writing, playing. I don't have any like firm plans. I'm gonna go to mainland Nova Scotia, but do you have anything?
I gotta go out west.
Zach,
My big blind spot. Trying to rectify it this year. Trying to go see those.
I think so too, and we all want to travel a little bit more and play golf. And like
Yeah.
I know Drew, when we were having our last conversation, that was still a little tight, but now we all have that opportunity. So it's a great time to kind of get out, play golf, travel, catch up on some of the things that we missed maybe in the past. But guys, really appreciate you guys taking the time. Obviously, like really happy I asked that routing question. We went down like a deep hole there. Is there anything we want to miss that we missed that we want to add on before we head out?
You want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I would say it's just because it's the time of writing. The time that this is released, we have the 100 that just got released, sort of the courses around there. I'd say that there's way too big of a focus on the 100, that idea, where it's
Okay.
like, if a golf course is 99, somehow it's better than the golf course that's 101st, right? It isn't. That's not the case. It reminds me kind of like the NFL draft, where, you go through the process of the draft and sort of you'll have 22 graded first-round players, but because there's 32 teams, 32 players automatically become first-round picks, and therefore the guy that's picked 25th is somehow viewed better than the guy who's 45th, where in reality they're the same graded player, but just it happens to have 32. There has to be 32 picks. It's the same way on the golf courses, right? Where, like we were saying, it's kind of sort of a big sort of grouping where they're all sort of very similar golf courses, and just because the course is 92nd compared to 105th, they're coin tosses, right?
Yeah.
And so if your course misses the list, don't get too mad at us. That's what
I
I'm
like
trying
that. Like Joe Pavelski's for a reason. We lost the lights in here, but I guess they're telling us to get out. But Joe Pavelski for a reason, and like obviously Connor McDavid's McDavid for a reason. Sometimes you're gonna hit, and sometimes there's gonna be misses. There's gonna be things that change, but really appreciate you guys. Thanks to Up Down Oshawa. Logo's in behind us here. If you guys want to come down and check it out, it's down in South Oshawa. Come down and hit some golf balls. But Drew, Zach, really appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much. That was fun.
That was good.
Awesome.
guys.
Thank you.
Perfect.